Learn the most empowering hiring techniques. Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with your host, Rick Gerard.
Amazon's leadership principles, i.e. their core values, have been the most critical element in their unprecedented success. Value alignment first, skills second. So why is this not a standard practice among all up-and-coming startups? The reason I believe is that leaders then become accountable for their actions, especially when they misbehave. Without values, it's easy to hide, it's easy to rationalize bad decisions, and easier to deflect blame when the shit hits the fan. This is why 9 out of 10 startups fail. Without the right people, your company will not be able to execute. And the right people are attracted to more than just money. They want growth, structure, and purpose. When your company demonstrates that none of these elements are present, the A players run. And you're left with the people who are willing to take the job. I'm Rick Gerard, and welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. We help entrepreneurs and executives win the strongest people. We do so by sharing insights from top-performing rebel entrepreneurs, game changers, and industry leaders like our guest today, Mr. Steve Anderson. Now, Steve is the CEO of Catalyit. He has spent decades shaping the insurance industry through a deeper understanding of emerging technologies and how businesses today can best integrate and leverage them. Steve is a sought-after speaker and influencer. He is also the author of the widely anticipated book, The Bezos Letters, where he reveals the 14 principles for business growth based on the ideas and patterns that emerged when he examined Jeff Bezos' 21 annual letters to Amazon shareholders, which is what makes Steve the perfect expert for today's topic. Steve, welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show today.
Rick, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you, my friend. Today we're going to discuss, we're going to take this a little personal too, but we're going to discuss balancing the need with patience to get the right hire. And then we're going to talk about how to put the right structure in place to land them. Sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan.
When we talked prior to the show, you shared with me a really interesting hiring story. I figure we can open up with that.
Great. Actually, a little while ago, I was looking for a new employee to help out. We were growing rapidly as those startup, modes, and thought we had found somebody who would work with, really well in the position that we were looking for. And the short version, we can go into more detail, obviously, but is they didn't work out. And we found that out pretty quickly, which partly is fortunate. And the unfortunate part is just a disruption both to us in the business, but also to the individual. It was not a good situation. And um, this is, I think, where we'll dive in a little bit, but it certainly was not taking my own advice. I write a lot about in the book how Amazon looks at hiring and how Bezos structured the hiring process, certainly early on, and really has continued through their growth over the last 26 years or so.
That was one of the things that I remember reading really like back in the 90s. Customer obsession was their number one leadership principle, and they did behavioral interviewing, which was totally foreign to me based on that. And then I think early 2000s, I actually did some work with Amazon. So it was kind of interesting because then I really delved into like what it is they were doing, which was really unique to other companies.
And I think a couple things you said in your introduction, certainly resonated with me in terms of my looking at the shareholder letters and kind of that flow through. In fact, in the very first 97 letter, Bezos says it's not easy to work here. When I interview people, I tell them you can work long, hard, or smart, but at Amazon you can't choose 2 out of 3. And this is the phrase that resonate with what you said. But we are working to build something important, something that matters to our customers, something we can tell our grandchildren about, kind of that purpose, and again, attracting the A player. So that's another comment you made that resonated with me, because at Amazon they do look for A players, and I say in my book, A players want to work with A players, not the other way around.
100%. I've been working the other side as a recruiter for a number of years, and I've had lots of candidates that have come back to me and said, hey, look, Ed, I don't want to work with this team. Well, why?
Hmm.
Because they just seem like they're winging it. I want to be with a lot of other smart people. I want a chance that if I'm going to put my time in here, that it's going to equate to be worth something for me later on down the road.
Well, you know, again, that sense of meaning. I'm working on something important, and I loved his long-term thinking. Something we can tell our grandchildren about.
Where do you think you were kind of off the mark on the one hire? That's kind of a challenge I think a lot of people experience.
Yeah, so again, as I said, you know, I was growing, having work that needed to be done, looking for help to do it. Um, Came across a candidate that uh, knew a little bit about just from industry connections, and ended up um, hiring pretty quickly. And I think that may be kind of the first, which is not taking the time to make sure the individual actually would fit what we were looking for. And we had gone through the process of what I think was a pretty good job description, um, and again, not taking the time to make sure that fit was there, and that's that idea of miscasting, right? Great person, lots of skills. That was not the issue, but not fitting in with, you know, really maximizing their skill set in terms of what we needed, and then the mismatch, you know, became more and more apparent, unfortunately.
So is the pacing determined by the candidate? So maybe the candidate had another offer, their time frame was fairly short.
Yep.
Gosh, that happens so often.
Yeah. No, I mean, you know, we kind of came in at the last minute, had some, you know, interviews, all phone, right, base, which that's not good or bad. It just is what it is. You know, and we felt like we had to move fast if we wanted this person. And again, I think, um, and I'll go back to Amazon. They take a long time to interview, and it could be right multiple interviews with multiple people, some phone, some video, maybe, you know, as they get further along in person. But they're very intentional and deliberate about making sure that the person that they're bringing in will fit into the Amazon culture. And not everybody does. And I think that's what's clear. Certainly for Amazon, what people need to be clear about, everybody shouldn't work there, right? Everybody doesn't fit into what their culture is, certainly back early on, but even forward to today. And again, I knew this up here, you know, which I think is a lesson is you can kind of know it, but trying to apply it is actually really difficult.
The hurry up thing, when the pacing is determined by the candidate and we start to get FOMO, that's a big clue that a lot of times the candidate is just shopping the highest offer. And you really need to take a step back and say, hey, let's slow this down. Let's make sure we're gathering the right evidence to support whether or not we should hire somebody. That's also not having an interview process and timeline in place by which you guys operate. And very few startups do. They wing it. We can talk to you tomorrow if you want. And they show this flexibility. It's almost like we show the desperation that we need somebody really badly. And we all know how that ends up for the person who's super desperate.
Well, and one of my principles in the book is this idea of, you know, maintaining your culture and not compromising. And again, you know, it's hard to even say it out loud, but again, I knew that in my head, but not in practice, and didn't at the time didn't make the connection, which is unfortunate.
FOMO is a powerful thing. We fear that we're going to mess out on this candidate, so we make a rash decision. And the rationalization is usually, hey, you know what? Like, what's the worst can happen?
Right.
And it's that scene in Dumber and Dumber. What do you think the chances of us getting together are? Well, you know, 1 in a million. Ooh, you're saying there's a chance, right? So
Right.
yes, there's a chance this person might work out, but the chances are actually greater that the person won't work out. And you're doing a disservice to the person too, you know, by not putting them in a place where they're going to thrive.
Yeah, that was actually one of the hardest parts of the whole process is, you know, again, great person, and really a disservice. You're right, and that's what's hard.
The intention of the interview is really to understand, extract evidence to support whether or not we are going to be a place where this person's going to thrive. Not can this person do the work. And I think that's the hard part to really wrap your head around. The mindset of people has changed. It's not about somebody just coming in and doing the work and being happy because you pay them. There's got to be something bigger that's going to keep them around.
Correct. Yep, I agree. And again, I go back to the second letter that Bezos wrote in '98, where he lays out three questions that he encourages his people to ask when they're making a hiring decision, which is, will you admire this person? Number one. Number two is, will this person raise the average level of effectiveness in the group they're entering? And then three, along what dimension might this person be a superstar? And that one's interesting because it goes on to explain it might not be and probably isn't work related, but what other interests do they have? How well rounded are they? Or are they only this one dimension? And I think, again, looking back on it now, those are three really good questions as part of that hiring process.
Yeah. And you know what? We almost approach it too, like from a scarcity perspective as opposed to an abundance perspective. There's, millions of people out there. There's not just one person who could do the job and they just happen to come across your desk on Indeed that day. You're listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. I'm your host, Rick Gerard. And for our podcast listeners, we're going to take a quick educational moment from our sponsors.
I want to take a break real quick just to let you know about a new show we've just added to the network. Up Next at Work, hosted by Gene and Kata Keel of the Devon Group. Fantastic show. If you're looking for something that pushes the norm, pushes the boundaries, has some really spirited conversations, Google Up Next at Work, Gene and Kata Keel from the Devon Group.
Hey, check out stridesearch.com. There you'll find additional content and resources to order your copy of Healing Career Wounds. Let it be your company's secret weapon to hiring the strongest talent. Our guest today is Steve Anderson, and we're discussing kind of combination of how Amazon hires and then how to structure your interview process to where you can avoid FOMO and making the wrong hire. So let's talk about how we solved this problem or how you solved it. Where'd you start?
Well, again, looking back now, having a little time to do a really review of the whole process, it comes down to a few things, and we've touched on those a little bit. One is, having a process, and as you say, new startup, lots of exciting things going on, lots of different needs in the business, but taking the time to determine and figure out, okay, what is the process we should use? And certainly you could use either Amazon or somebody else as a template to at least start asking. But even, what are the right questions to ask to get to what are the skills and capabilities of the individual? Certainly you want to know that. But also, again, I like that, what else do they bring into the group? And, he says later in another letter that, he hopes employees now say, I'm glad I got in when I did in the past because I don't think I could make it now. Meaning you're continually raising the bar in the quality and the type of person that you're looking at.
But here's the thing, as a startup, it's so critical that you get it right with the strongest people right off the bat. I mean, you don't have that luxury. Amazon can absorb bad hires pretty easily.
Now they can, yes.
Well, even past 10 years, probably they could.
Oh, yes, yeah. But early on, I mean, they were a startup like anybody else. And I think probably the difference there is whether intuitively or learned, I'm not quite sure, but Bezos understood better than many, better than I'll say that, the importance of having the right people in the right place to help Amazon do what it's done over the last, 25 years.
Let's talk a little bit about structure because I deal with this quite often. And if anybody's interested, I actually have a structured document that I can send you that works really well with startups. Essentially, Like, let's talk about process and the structure. Did you formalize the structure that you put in place now for future hires moving forward?
We have an initial draft, yes. I call it a work in progress because we'll be looking, for additional people here over probably the next few months. So it's top of mind right now to try and get some structure around the process so we um, learn from mistakes made in the past.
What's important is that you have the stages. First conversation is a phone screen, or we call it a discovery call, right? We want to understand whether or not somebody's position right for the organization or whether or not we have an A, B, or C player. Then you want to go to like interview number 1, interview number 2, interview number 3, and have a timeline attached to what those look like.
And I would suspect who should do those interviews, right? That's what I'm, part of what I'm looking at is, okay, it's not, I don't want it all just to be me. I want other opinions and other viewpoints on the people that we're considering.
You want to empower your people to make the decisions. You should come in at the end of the process. It's not about you doing all the work because your team is going to have to work with them on a day-to-day basis. But the challenge that I often see is that we don't train our people on how to conduct the interview. So we just assume something magical is happening when the two people start talking. But I've experienced people just having conversations about baseball for 45 minutes and said, oh, this person's great. We should hire them. We have a lot in common. We went to the same school.
Yeah. And that's part about the intentionality and the process of making sure you're asking the right questions and getting I wouldn't even call it the right information. That's part of it, but the right feel for who they are as a person. And again, will they raise the average effectiveness? I mean, are they going to improve the group, the company at this point, when they come in?
I would say you want to get the right information, the right evidence, as opposed too often people rely on gut feeling. Like, I just didn't feel like this person's right. Well, why? I don't know. Something felt off. But that's been problematic. Where I've seen that be problematic for companies is when you have somebody who's not necessarily your high performer in the company, maybe a B player, and an A player comes in, and that person might be threatened. So there's personal motives behind it, which in essence, if they down hire, then now you're in a lot of trouble because A player is going to leave and you're going to be left with people who are just there for the paycheck, and God help you, that happens, right?
Yep. Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. And we did use, some testing around, again, I wouldn't say skills, personality, fit, et cetera. And those are, again, information, right? Tools that you can use to get a better sense for what's happening with the person and how they might fit with the other team members.
Well, the beauty of the Amazon process that I felt was genius early on, like when I started looking into it, was they evaluate you for core values first, use behavioral interviewing questions. They ask you questions that are designed to extract evidence of how you operate. You're giving examples of a situation in which you had that problem and you solved it somehow. And the steps in which you took to get there and how it affected other people, how you thought about it, all that data that they gather from that is not what's gathered from a lot of other companies, period. But the beauty of the behavioral interview is that you gather all this data, you can actually make a correct decision because you can say, hey, look at when this person had this issue, they did A, B, C, and D. And then the results were here. And then as a result, these few things came into place. And you have this story that backs whether or not somebody's going to fit with the organization. One of the things that I've noticed is that A players resonate toward that. They love explaining exactly how they did something, why they did it, and get pushback from some people. But usually those are not your top performers.
Right.
So it does put a really good mechanism in place to ensure that you're getting the right people to buy in. And since nobody else is doing that, you're standing above your competition.
Agreed. And I think that's one of the powers of the leadership principles that Amazon has put in place over the last number of years is, and I remember several quotes from research I did where comments were made like, well, they're not just plaques on a wall, but they're part of virtually every conversation that we have or every decision that's made. like customer obsession, right? So, as an example, and again, that's really hard as a startup, right? To even think through some of those things, and maybe even harder to put in place and become part of that framework that I can build, any company can build that will resonate with the employees, the type of people, not even employees, the type of people that you want to work with in order to grow whatever the vision is that you have for your company.
I'm going to push back on you on that one. I believe that it's maybe a half a day to a day of your time that you sit down with you and your team and you can build out all that. You can hone the process, but once you have it down, it makes everything much easier. Then your people start making better decisions because they're making decisions based on, hey, are we showing customer obsession when we make this decision? And then, you give people something to push back on you with.
Okay, I can agree with that. Right now, it feels daunting, and
That's because you're overwhelmed just like I am.
here's what I'll say. Um, it's probably not as daunting as I think it is, and I think you're right. If I sat down and concentrated on and kind of sat in it for a while, meaning half a day, maybe a day, I could come up because I go back to the book. I came up with 14 principles on growth of how Amazon grew. Took a little while, but it continues to resonate. So I will take that challenge on.
All right, challenge given. Perfect. So we talked about the structure a little bit. What would you say would be kind of the other key points besides structure?
Well, structure, again, again, we talked about FOMO, trying not to get too caught up in I've got to have somebody just to do the work. And for that, then really looking at, okay, what are some other options? Meaning, if I'm going to slow down or be really careful about hiring somebody full time, what other options do I have to get the work done that I need to get done? Could be a VA, could be executive assistant, could be a temp, could be right. There are a number of options that could come into play to get the work done that need to get done, but not until you're ready, not bring in somebody into the organization.
Project-based work that's critical, especially when you're a startup.
Well, and it's probably easier today than it ever has been. I mean, if there's a silver lining to the pandemic, it's that, work can get done anywhere. And there are a lot of people who resonate, be that, gig economy type or, um, like I said, um, executive assistant, virtual assistants, lots of companies out there that can help fill in on a project basis or just on an hourly basis to do more administrative work. And we've done that a lot at Catalyit, is offloading administrative stuff to others so that the people can work, my team can work on what they're really good at. And so we're really trying to be focused and intentional about getting rid of what you don't like so that you can spend your time on what you resonate with and you're really good at.
Here's something I've learned from this experience. You definitely have to interview those people just like you are an employee. Don't get caught up in FOMO for sure, because if you're working through an agency, a lot of time, well, look at, you need to make a decision on this person quickly. They have the skills you need, and you have to really kind of put your foot down and go, hey, that's not how I work.
I definitely did the interview process with the individual that I'm working with now. So I agree with that.
So after structure, anything else that you kind of put in play that could be helpful for the audience?
Well, I think what I want to say is checking. I hesitate to say checking references because that's fraught, but talking to people, if you're in an industry that's small, just talking to people that you either through your research or know that the person that you're looking at might have interactions with, and just have a conversation with them, and just get some feedback, and at the same time be careful of that feedback, um, because it might not tell you what you need to know today in order to determine that person's the right fit. So that's kind of two sides to the same coin on that one.
All right, Steve, shoot, we're getting pretty close on time. What would be 2 or 3 key takeaways you can give the audience that can plug into their business today?
Well, again, we've talked about hire slow, have a process so you can, one, repeat it, and two, have a higher chance of finding the best individual for what you need done. And three, I would say train your team. I mean, have them part of that process. Even as small as we are, we're not very many people right now, but getting them involved, because as you said, they're going to have to work with them too. So I think those are kind of three quick things that I hopefully will learn.
It's all a learning process. All right, Steve, thanks so much for your time and investment today, and I want to welcome you to the Higher Power Radio community. What would be the best way in which members of our community can reach you?
Well, my main social media platform is LinkedIn. I have quite a few followers there. And Steve Anderson, you might bring it up, or Steve Anderson Insurance, because of my insurance and risk management background. And the website for the book, if you're interested, is thebezosletters.com.
So I want to thank our listening audience for tuning in to this week's episode of Higher Power. Quick thanks to our team, Brian Colburn, Ayla Gerard, and Andrea Ballin. If you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share after all this show's for you. And we want to continue to bring valuable content that you can use in your business week after week. You can join the Higher Power Radio community at Higher, H-I-R-E, Power, P-O-W-E-R, Radio, R-A-D-I-O.com, or you can drop me an email at rickatstridesearch.com. Tune in next Tuesday. Our guest is going to be Tom Brunskill. He is the co-founder and CEO of Forage. I'm your host, Rick Girard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power Radio. Catch our LinkedIn Live show every Tuesday at noon, or download the podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate you joining us on Higher Power Radio with your guide to hiring success, Rick Girard.